Over and over and over and over. Hello everyone, Ryan here, and today I'm starting a new series where I'll be looking at albums a decade later after their release, and the first episode of this will be on the LCD Soundsystem classic album Sound of Silver. LCD Soundsystem are still a New York dance punk, electronic, dance rock band that broke out onto the scene in the early 2000s with their very inventive style that was very catchy and also had a very charismatic vocalist that was very sarcastic and witty, and many things made this band lovable. And one of their most famous songs, Losing My Edge, captured the hearts of many pretentious music nerds like myself. Of course I would love it, and this song was sarcastic as hell. It was hilarious, the way that they talked about all the different bands in this song basically summed up critics' ways of listening to music, and this song basically embodies everything LCD Soundsystem were about. Great synth lines, a fantastic beat, and just hilarious lyrics, and this carried over throughout the rest of LCD Soundsystem's career on their first album as well, which was far more longer and had very long dance tracks. But then we got to Sound of Silver, which refined things very well. There were still long tracks on this album though, and those David Byrne comparisons of the Talking Heads will always be there, and people since this album have basically pointed out more and more that this is a massive comparison, a huge influence on LCD Soundsystem's sound. And although I do see that comparison, of course it is pretty obvious comparison. It's not like their influence was so big that it ruined the music. LCD Soundsystem had their own charm and their own way of making themselves stand out and being a fantastic band. Sound of Silver to me is LCD Soundsystem's best ever album. I think this has some of the best songs on this album, particularly Time to Get Away, a quirky track with the typical James Murphy vocal style. It's got very tongue-in-cheek lyrics where Murphy is basically saying he wants to get away from someone. It's very funny, this song, I think, and it's got such a interesting melody. I absolutely love this track. North American Scum continues that humour that LCD Soundsystem are known to have, where it plays on these stereotypes of America and also the flaws of America as well, and I love the lyrics on this track. Along with the great lyricism though comes the classic LCD Soundsystem synth lines, particularly on the first track, Get Innocuous, and it starts off the album with this big beat sound, very reminiscent of the Chemical Brothers. It's a very electronically tinged track, and it really has that 90s electronic feel in general, and LCD Soundsystem were always really good at making those dancey electronic tracks, and this is one of those great examples here. They're also incredible at making these killer hooks, like on the track Watch the Tapes, read all the pamphlets and watch the tapes. This is just a catchy as hell song, and it's one of the best choruses on this album. It's a fantastic track. But I really need to get to the two of the best songs on this album, and quite possibly the greatest songs of the 2000s in general. First of all My Friends, one of the best songs ever. If you've heard the song, you will know why. The build of this song, where the instrumentation just kind of collectively comes together by the end, and the synth line, the skippity beat on this track, it just soars all the way through. It's an absolutely fantastic song. I absolutely love this. And also Someone Great. This is probably the best songwriting LCD Soundsystem have ever done in their career. It's an absolutely hard-hitting track, and it's about James Murphy's therapist who died, and the horrifying realization of the fact that he wants to talk to someone about the death, but obviously the person he wanted to talk about was his therapist, and they have died. And this is kind of a weird thing for me because it reminds me of a modern day album, Mount Erie's A Crow Looked at Me, which Phil Everham is dealing with death of his wife, but during the course of that time his therapist also died, which was just a horrific incident to happen during that time. And it just reminds me of that listening back to that track. It's quite strange. But the thing about this song is that if anyone's ever experienced the loss of a loved one or a close person in their life, then this track could easily be very relatable. The vocals on this track are just so haunting and beautiful. It's just such a sad song. And I love that LCD Soundsystem were able to change the pace there and make such a heartfelt track. But unfortunately, one of the tracks that doesn't do this very well is Sound of Silver, the title track. And of course they changed the pace here, but it's not a slowed down ballad like Someone Great, but it is a worse track, I think. It's got a lower bass, the vocals aren't exciting, it's quite monotonous, and they're a lot better when Murphy isn't going in his lower register and he's in his upper register and sounds a bit more livelier, because on this track he sounds quite lifeless and it's a bit dull for me. However, they do close on a fantastic track, New York I Love You But You're Bringing Me Down. It's a love-hate relationship with New York, and this track is an ode to that relationship he has. He talks about how high the rent pay is, and also the crime rate is ridiculously high, but with all that being said, he'll always love New York, and LCD Soundsystem have always been about New York. This sound is very much New York, it's dance punk, it's kind of where this originated from, and I love this closing track. It sums up LCD Soundsystem as a whole. So yeah, this album has aged extremely well. This will always be one of the best albums of the 2000s, and considering this is my first episode for the Decade Later series, this actually probably is the best album of 2007. When I look back at all the best albums that came out that year, this would be the top of my list. So of course I would have to say this is an A star. It's a classic album to me, and even though it is only 10 years old, I still think this will resonate with many people in years to come, and you should certainly check it out if you've never heard this album before. And the best thing about LCD Soundsystem is that you could probably put all their songs kind of in a playlist and make a party playlist just out of their discography, so you wouldn't even have to listen to their albums all the way through. You could just listen to them on shuffle, which isn't something I usually recommend to people when it comes to music, but LCD Soundsystem do make that list for that kind of music, and I think it works well. But I would recommend you listen to this whole album all the way through if you never have, and make sure you subscribe for more music reviews, and have a good day.